Which profession attracts the worst kinds of people? Story 1. I'm a casino dealer. People losing money brings out the worst qualities in them, especially when I deal with high-limit games. Plus, the pit boss/supervisors won't throw a person out who is literally spending thousands. Doesn't matter what they do or say, the casino doesn't want to lose those kinds of patrons. They're catered to. They can be so awful to the dealers. The job has made me look at humanity in a completely different light, lol. Pro relationship tip. Bring a date to the casino and see how they treat the dealer if they're losing. You'll see what kind of person they really are. I have about 10 years of experience in the industry. Story 2. Stockbrokers. I have some friends who are stockbrokers. I love them, but man, they are some bullshit artists. And not like, oh, they're a good salesman and could sell you anything. No, it's like they make shit up as they go along and try to sound confident in what they say. I have met a couple people who are successful lifelong stockbrokers. To be a successful lifelong stockbroker, you actually have to like what you do. They all had crazy eyes. Each and every one. Story 3. Law enforcement. Double-edged sword because it attracts the best and the worst. The best in people who want to help, protect, and do good. The worst in people who want to exact authority over other people. Power-hungry assholes who are insecure and have short fuses and low tolerance for defiance. If you can't handle someone defying you without losing your shit, you shouldn't be a cop. Story 4. Substance abuse mental health professionals seem to fall into one of the following categories. A. Wonderful, angelic, and highly competent souls who truly want to help drug addicts and alcoholics. There may be 20% of the counselors, optimistically. B. Burnt out, incompetent, lazy, don't care types. Another 60%. Or C. Absolute personality disordered, narcissistic, Machiavellian, sadistic types who really get off on the enormous power and control they have over the lives and fates of the people under their care. Maybe another 20%. Your mileage may vary. The last group can do a lot of damage. This makes me very grateful for not having ever encountered anyone in Category C so to wield power like that over people at their absolute most desperate. I would also say to anyone, don't let the fear of those types stop you from getting the care you need. The Category A people make it worth it. Story 5. I'm probably going to get some hate for this. The military. The US Army, to be precise. Probably 99% of soldiers are good, honest people. The nature of the job just simply attracts some sickos. The Army does what it can, but it takes a long time to kick someone out of the Army. Source, 6 years active duty. Story 6. Sales. I swear to God, salesmen have an uncanny knack for justifying immoral decisions. Maybe it's because it's so frequently paid in piece rates, so they will quite literally do or say anything to get the sale, even if it's 100% false. But wow, salesmen seem like they would sell their mom to the devil for a quarter if given the opportunity. Story 7. Psychology. There are lots of great people in that field, but it also attracted the most manipulative and destructive asshole I've ever known. He's a licensed therapist now, and I feel sorry for anyone who crosses his path. I am a graduated psychology student, and I would say that about 30% of students were really kind, empathetic people that were passionate about helping others. The rest were some of the most disturbed, unpleasant people I have ever met in my life. I studied computer science for a year before psychology, and the computer science students were 1,000,000 times more compassionate on average. Story 8. A lot of people who work in restaurant kitchens are ex-felons. They basically fall into two types. Ones who are getting their shit back together, and those who are just between jail sentences. The former are usually better coworkers than your average person. The latter tend to be assholes, volatile and unpredictable. Story 9. In my experience, literally every profession ever, every job I've ever worked has had shitheads, liars, thieves, abusers, and just nasty people you're better off avoiding. It's a sad fact that at least 1 of every 5 people is a total shithead. Story 10. Academia. Intelligent people in very niche areas with no consideration for the real world and social interaction, while simultaneously being told they are the best in the world at certain specific subject areas, which is true, but just not as many people care as academics think they do. You end up with an unnecessarily toxic environment of people trying to intellectually one-up each other and throw anyone off the ladder on their way up. It's a cruel, nasty, petty, and poisonous environment. My friend is in academia, and my God, is he the perfect fit for it. I'm too tired to list all the toxic and negative traits, but he's most of them, generally just an extreme superiority complex. Only reason I'm still friends is because he plays games with me online, and new friends are impossible to find, lol. Story 11. Unpopular opinion, but nurses. There is a lot of toxic, abusive, high school girl drama type behavior among nurses. It's such an important job, and about half the people doing it shouldn't be responsible for a yogurt, let alone a human being's life. I've seen some shit, man. Story 12. The executives that run MLMs. I'm a consultant who has had those executives as a client. When our HR expert told them that they needed a policy on diversity, equity, and inclusion, the CEO responded that they didn't need anyone in DC telling them how to run their company. Like, the HR expert wasn't even saying they needed it in an ethical way, just that they needed it to avoid lawsuits. The CEO still refused. So, legally exposing yourself to own the libs seems like a pretty awful type of person. Story 13. After the Great Recession, I worked in a bank. The bank was close to a collection agency, so the workers would come in to cash their checks because many of them had wrecked their own credit so badly they couldn't open a checking account. These people were freaks of fucking nature, I swear to God. If you ever were feeling down about yourself, maybe you don't look the way you want to, maybe you could lose a few pounds, all you had to do was take one look at them. I promised that you would be an Abercrombie and Fitch model in comparison. Story 14. Car salesmen. The further up the chain they go, sales managers, the worse they usually are. That and car finance people. They have a financial incentive to bend people over, so the ones with no conscience are more successful and tend to move up the ladder. Not all of them, but a lot of them. It's one of those things where the business culture at the top needs to be set up right or corruption will run rampant. Most of the time, those at the top just want to see big monthly numbers, and they either encourage or willfully ignore dirty business practice. Story 15. Oil field workers. They might not start off bad, but after being around each other and away from their families, they become total monsters and often live double lives. FIFO, fly in, fly out work fucks people up. I have worked with people who have done it, and even the ones who weren't total psychos have admitted it was dragging them that way. Heard stories about perfectly ordinary guys working at a mining job for 2-3 years, just offing themselves out on the site one day. No warning, no nothing. It's nothing to do with the work itself, but a lot of people only think they can handle the long stints and the isolation, and in an emotionally draining environment, a lot of the sort of people who thrive are more than willing and able to make it worse on those who struggle. I had one coworker, a self-admitted shit stirrer, who I swear kept a tally on the inside of his locker of all the people he'd either made quit or get fired, and he was far from the worst. Story 16. Any which gives you some sort of power over others. Whether it is something as simple as telling people what to do to the more nefarious things, being in a position where people have to follow what you tell them brings in the worst of people seeking to abuse it. Story 17. Hairstylists. I am one, and more often than not I meet other stylists who are super catty and stuck up. Textbooks mean girls. Thankfully, I work in a spa where everyone has more of a caregiver focus, so we all look out for each other. Story 18. As a 2D animator, you really can't go 5 minutes without seeing degenerate shit. People using this craft to act out their sexual fantasies and putting it in their professional works. I mean, all the shit you saw in most 90s, early aughts children's TV shows really was just cringeworthy. Especially since all the shit started to come out about guys like Dan Schneider and John Kricfalusi. It really makes you think what else was going on, lol. Story 19. Volunteer supervisor type positions. In nonprofit, we sometimes have to rely on volunteers for jobs which normally would be paid positions in corporations. The people who want jobs with power over other people and are willing to do it for free are often some of the nastiest, abusive people you'll ever meet. You're not going to find a normal person for it. You just have to assess if they'll be tolerable or not. Story 20. Management consulting. I worked in that belly of a beast for a bit, and I realized I couldn't get along or fit in for good reason. To be fair, there are some good people that end up leaving in exit opportunities, but I'm suspicious of people who soak their ethos in that type of culture and stay for a long time. It takes a special type of person to uphold a certain value and belief system to enjoy. Working overnight selling work to clients that frankly amounts to PowerPoint slides heavily lifted from another client project, only to be scrapped. Nothing feels proprietary, yet we sell like it is. We often made jokes that it didn't really feel anything was of value. Treat colleagues, clients, managers, everyone all the same in the level of customer-client-facing personality. I get faking it is important in life, but I've seen people adopt whole 180 personas just to fit in, 24/7, 365. People judge you immensely, and in order to succeed and be put onto good projects, you need to hide anything about your brand as liability. Being likable, I'd argue, is more important in some cases than doing a good job. Accept the reality that they can be fired in an up or out culture where people who aren't promoted are asked to leave. In my honest opinion, consulting is a marketing machine with a questionable value proposition. If you enjoy titles, money, no sleep, and health downfalls with soulless work, it attracts you. Story 21. Human Resources. What the F is it about HR people? The ones close to management are two-headed snakes waiting to bite you in the ass. The ones in recruiting are just incompetent? At one company I was at, a recruiter went on vacation but didn't schedule any of their interviews. I thought that was messed up until I went to a different company and it happened again, multiple times. Maybe they just know how hard it is to get fired because they're the people that do the firing. Story 22. Youth counselors and pastors. One would come to our school when I was a kid. He went to the church with the principal. One time, a kid made a joke teasing him, and he choked the kid. No joke. It was in middle school. This adult was free to wander around talking to kids unsupervised. Another one in town sold weed to underage girls exclusively. Plus, you always hear about them being pedos. It happens so much it's crazy. Story 23. EMS. I worked on an ambulance for 7 years at numerous agencies along the east coast of the US. There's almost no barrier to entry for that job, and companies hire anyone with a pulse. All the people that are too fucked up to qualify for the military or police swarm into this job and bring all their toxicity with them. Racism, sexual assault, and patient abuse was rampant, and everything gets swept under the rug. The only people I ever saw fired from EMS were the ones that went to state agencies to report any of these occurrences. As a result, any given EMS company you see is rife with abuse and staffed by people with barely any medical training at all. Story 24. Learning supports educators. They are meant to empower the children in their care, but instead spend their time gossiping and nitpicking between themselves about the children, about their families, each other, and every other staff member, or pretty much anyone they come in contact with. Story 25. Rappers. I don't know why, but really famous rappers have some kind of curse attached to them. A lot of rappers die horrible deaths, usually in violent crimes. At least singers or actors have the privilege of destroying themselves with drugs, car accidents, and poor life decisions. A lot of rappers grew up in bad communities and still live there, or just moved to a bad spot. That's why it seems like rappers are getting killed a lot more. Story 26. Politics. All kinds of professions where one can work with the vulnerable and weak, children, mentally challenged, sick, and all professions that give you power over other people. Those are only done well by people with exceptionally good moral compass and what some call the calling. Story 27. Serial killers are often found attempting to start careers where they have arbitrary authority and seem official. They also tend to be immediately kicked out of those professions and are relegated to the lowest form of authority, like security guard or animal control. But you said we're attracted, not actually succeeded in. Story 28. Grocery stores attract the worst kinds of people. It's where the bottom of society usually ends up. There's always conflict and high turnover because shitty people end up in middle management and make it hell for everyone else. I've known lots of people that worked in retail, and it's usually always the same story. Story 29. I might get flack for this, but cops. It doesn't matter if only 20% of them are power-tripping racist jerks. I am generally terrified of police officers. There is no process to prevent those personality types from having a job as an officer of the peace. All it takes is one asshole cop tormenting you for fun to ruin your life. Story 30. Lawyer here. Surprisingly, what I've learned is that construction is way more of a cesspool. Mistresses with corporate credit cards paying their rent, brothers suing brothers, not paying overtime as required by statutes, just fraud of every kind I can imagine. Seriously, never trust a general contractor or even subcontractors. They spend more time lying than working, other than the rare good ones. Also, all kinds of people turn into the worst kind of people when someone dies and everyone starts fighting over the inheritance. Fucking gross. Have some class. Story 31. Animal rescue. There is a not insignificant portion of people in animal rescue that are sociopathic narcissists that use animal rescue as a way to garner sympathy, attention, and distract from how absolutely batshit crazy they are. They don't care about the animals once they've been taken into care. That all falls on the hardworking volunteers that actually deal with the literal shit. They're just entirely focused on the rush and attention they get from the initial rescue and posting about it on social media. My personal experience with this also included Spite rescuing. His rescue was beyond capacity for years. Every time a long-term volunteer burns out and begs him to stop taking in animals because we can't provide proper care for the ones we had, he'd basically bully them into leaving, and then go out of his way to rescue more animals as soon as they're gone. This has escalated to the point where there's no other rescue in the country that could possibly hope to take in the animals if he gets shut down, which he will eventually given the standards he fails to maintain. Story 32. Landlords who buy up all the housing opportunities they can find, either to rent properties out as Airbnb or to not have to work themselves and use their properties to pay their own bills. Not saying every landlord is bad, and technically it's not a profession. Story 33. Hedge fund managers and stockbrokers. If you think police or essential workers are the worst kinds of people, you have your head up your ass. Those professions are underpaid, underappreciated, and the most abused jobs in America. Wall Street attracts scumbags who would sell their own kids if there was a profit to be made. They will gleefully and with malice aforethought destroy the entire economy as long as they get theirs first. Story 34. If you aspire to nothing less than Bezos, Zuckerberg, Gates levels of wealth and power, tech startups are the way to get there. Even banking has a much lower ceiling, but a much higher average outcome. While 90% of the people in tech, especially the rank and file, are cool nerdy people who just want to build new things for people, there is definitely a loud, visible minority of people in this field for whom mere hundreds of millions of dollars would represent a failure. And you can imagine just what sorts of things they're willing to do to get there. Story 35. Lawyers, politicians, and many times law enforcement. They often are excellent at twisting the truth and don't think the law applies to them. Scary people. Narcissists are often attracted to these fields because they love to win, be the hero, and to be praised. Not all are like this, but too many for my liking. Power does strange things to even the nicest people. Story 36. The most consistent profession with terrible people I have dealt with are mortgage brokers, specifically ones that do not work for banks. They only want to get you qualified for a loan and sell that shit to Fannie Freddie ASAP. Too many are used car salesmen parading as professionals, and that is what these brokers are, salespeople. I have seriously had more honest dealings with car salesmen than mortgage brokers. Story 37. Supervisory and management positions. There are basically two types. Type 1 is there to make sure you can do your job, have everything you need, are fully trained up, etc., solve any issues, and take up slack. Type 2 thinks they are there to make sure you are doing your job, and shouting equals authority. These are the types who are more attracted to the sense of superiority, the money, and the perceived lack of work they think a manager does. They didn't get their position by skill or knowledge, but usually by playing a good game and putting down other people while climbing up the current manager's asshole. These will sell their own kids if they thought it would get them more authority and gravitas. These people are always right and will not be questioned. They can fuck up all day long and you are expected not to bring attention to it. But if any of the peasants make a slight mistake, it has to be shouted from the rooftops. The long game for these people is to get in good with higher management, calling on them to back them up if anything does go wrong. There are far more of Type 2 in my experience. Type 1s generally just become beaten down over time when they realize they're surrounded by Type 2s who will absolutely backstab them if they think Type 1 is making them look bad. Most places I've worked at are dominated by Type 2. In my current place, we've had 3 managers come in from outside after one left, and not one of them stayed once they realized what they were up against.